5th, 2023 to order. First item on the agenda is the approval. Patrick, we have some changes.
We have several, Mr. Chair, if it pleases the board. First of all, under your consent agenda, please add 5J, approval of a liquor license for Red Luna Taco Factory. Under 6A, we will be reviewing the joint powers agreement between the township and City of Gem Lake as it regards the irrigation system potentially going in here. Under 8D, we're going to be talking about Met Council work group that is going to be established, and David is here to talk about that with us. A memo should have been sent out to you this afternoon. We will be striking, I'm sorry, I passed this one over. We will be striking and tabling 8C. The North Oaks Company discussion will be for the July 17th meeting upon Evan's confirmation of the 60-day rule. And finally, under new business as well, 8E, employee retirement. With that, I submit to you the amended Township Board agenda, gentlemen.
Goodness.
Yes,
All right.
sorry.
Board have anything else?
No.
Hearing none, I need a motion to approve as amended.
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
All fair say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Item 3 is approval of payment of the bills.
I signed off on the bills. Move to approve payment of bills.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. And I need approval of the minutes from June 21st. Anybody have any changes?
I saw none. Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. We have 10 consent agenda items. The board pleases, otherwise we can pull any of them off to discuss.
I have a question on consent agenda item 5B. Were you able to get the invoice fixed?
We did.
Just so the rest of the board knows, the purchase for these trees listed out Gem Lake as the purchaser, and I said it needed to be changed to reflect the township as the purchaser of the trees, in case there's warranty issues.
Okay. All right.
So if that's been fixed, I move, that's my only question, so.
I will move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
I'll second that.
All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, we'll go on to item 6A, old business. This is the Heritage Hall irrigation.
Yes, Mr. Chair, board did direct staff to check in with City of Gem Lake regarding the existing JPA between the two organizations, specific to the City of Gem Lake's request to put an irrigation system on the grounds here at Heritage Hall. Initial report was a 20% or 20 and 80 cost share agreement between the township and City of Gem Lake. However, in checking with finance as well as the mayor of Gem Lake on capital improvements, it is 50-50. So
Where is that stated?
Yeah.
I guess that's been practice more so than anything. Everything that's been capital has been 50-50. All others have been 20-80.
Okay, where is the 28 it stated?
That's what Patty told me.
Well, I have the same question. To me, it needs to be memorialized.
Okay.
Verbal agreements don't work real well.
Chad,
Yeah.
is that something we would have to amend this JPA?
Yes, we should formally amend the JPA to take all this into account.
Reflecting exactly what it is I just said, or is this the time to reconsider how it is?
Well, if these cost splits aren't clear in the JPA, then yeah, we should formally amend it so it's clear.
Well, okay, and that's fine. But are we going to amend this to reflect what I just stated, what practice has been, or what it is the board desires? I guess if they're not spelled out.
Well, okay, JPA is a contract.
Yep.
If we've been doing this way, if we've been doing it this way since we did the JPA, it really is the contract.
Okay.
So we should, but I recommend that you memorialize past practice as part of the contract. So it's clear for future boards.
Well, does the board have any problems with those percentages?
So let's go over those one more time. Capital improvements are,
50/50.
so if this needs to be re-roofed or anything, we're in for 50%
Uh-huh.
of the capital improvements or
Or an irrigation system.
new furniture or anything else that's purchased in here. Does it spell out what role we have in the decision-making process? Or are we just they say it and we pay half of it?
If we agree upon it.
It's an
It
agreement.
has to be agreed to, yes.
Yeah.
They can't dictate to you.
That's
All right, so is there
important.
a difference between capital improvements and elected or suggested improvements? I mean, this isn't exactly a priority or a mandated thing that they're asking for.
No.
So how do we rate that? Is it, it's not, it's really, is it under cosmetics? Is it under maintenance? Is it under, that would depend if we're 50/50 or 20/80, correct?
I think all of that stuff should be clarified, and this is an opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
Because someone says 20/80, another one says 50/50.
Yeah.
Where are they getting these numbers from?
Past practice. So and Chad's absolutely right. It probably should be memorialized and spelled out pretty clearly.
I'm not questioning what staff's saying.
Yeah,
He's saying
and
it's
I'm not
listed-
either. That's
yeah.
what we've done. So
So we're gonna have to table this and have
If-
Ed and maybe the mayor and, so we can get this finalized?
Just to clarify, that installation would not take place this year regardless. Is that correct?
well, if we got this all amended and changed by the second meeting here in July, and they could proceed, and the board agrees to proceed, we probably could. But I think after that, I don't see it turning around that quickly.
So does the joint powers agreement, as it relates to the irrigation, does that have to clarify or they automatically have to follow our rules as far as watering?
Well, yeah.
It's a different jurisdiction, but they're hooking up to township supplied water,
Providing
just
water.
like neighbors.
It's just the same way that North Oaks needs to adhere to our ordinances, so would the city of Gem Lake.
So is this the place to put that in, memorialize it?
Might be a good time, sure.
It can't hurt.
Sounds like we got a project.
Well, I think so. And who's paying, and the operational costs of that is solely the city of Gem Lakes for the water usage, it's like any other user of water?
Well, as of last week, talking to one of the Gem Lake Council folks, they didn't even have a second bid yet, so it doesn't seem like
Yeah.
they're rushing into this too quick either.
And we just spoke to Gretchen, I believe it was on Friday too, and she'll work with the board, whatever our decision is. So,
What?
but I think actually, it's good that this has come up. It's been a while since this has been, I don't know if it's ever been amended, Chad, has it?
No, not that I know
I think
of.
it's still just the boilerplate from,
Well,
2007.
it's a good time, this is not a new building, it's a good time to get it, so that we're not squabbling down the road over
so
responsibility.
I'm happy to impart, we're kind of just pausing this while we work through details on the JPA. I'm happy to give that news to Gretchen, and she'll probably be supportive of us doing this too, or the mayor, I should say.
Well, and I think part of it would be, I don't know how you want to classify as cosmetics or,
Yes, good point.
because all of a sudden, we're low-keyed, we're low budget, we're working off card tables. All of a sudden, the Gem Lake wants to come in and put fancy big podiums up here and computer screens in front of you. I want to know where that falls under, capital improvements or just a cosmetic upgrade.
I think the two partners have to agree upon that, like Chad was stating.
Right, but it's also the cost factor. Is it still the 20/80 or is it the 50/50?
Sure. I think if we clarify that and they follow and we follow procedure in terms of communicating each other's needs, we do have a say in what that's going to be. I think this is a good chance to do that.
All right, board, have any other questions?
No,
We are
Well,
tabling this.
You need a formal motion to table?
I'll make a motion to table the supplemental item 6A. It's broader than the Heritage Hall irrigation system. It really is to explore the joint powers agreement and codify that for the future as to what the agreement really represents.
I will second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Moving on, item 7. 7A is a cannabis sale moratorium.
Yes, Mr. Chair, staff did put together a sale of cannabis within the township. The township attorney did notify the board and staff that we do have until January 2025.
January 1, 2025, yeah.
Correct. To implement anything along these lines. So what we have submitted here is a moratorium to buy us that extra time to evaluate the impact on the township if we do decide to go in this direction. Mr. Attorney, would you like to comment on that?
That's correct, though keep in mind, we still also have the moratorium from last year on the cannabinol.
We got to back up, though. This is a public hearing.
Yes, it is.
Oh, we got to open it
Well,
up.
I need
Yeah.
Sorry.
a motion
I
to
gave you the
waive.
background too quick. I'm sorry.
I'll move to waive the reading that was properly published.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Then I need a motion to open up the public hearing.
I'll move to open up the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Now you
Now
can,
you want to repeat that?
Repeat. Rewind. So referring to the attorney to continue that discussion, this would be putting a pause on the sale of cannabis in the township so we can reconsider that. What were you saying?
Yeah,
Bob?
it's cannabis and cannabinoid products.
Yeah.
We still also have the moratorium from last August dealing with cannabinol products, the oils and that stuff, and the beverage infusions, those things. We have to still deal with that one.
but that one is going to be coming to an end in this August then, correct?
Correct, and we passed the moratorium to give you time to consider whether or not you want to adopt regulations dealing with the sales of those products.
Were those model regulations proposed someplace other than ourselves? I mean, are there proposals out there? Or is it lumped into this new bill,
No, they're separate.
separate? Okay.
They're separate.
So if we proceed with this moratorium, it would start effectively today's date?
Exactly.
And that would deal with cannabis and cannabinoid
Right.
sales, but we still got to
Cannabinol.
just check, and we
Making my
still
head hurt.
You're right.
have to have that
Yeah.
conversation.
Yes, we should have that be in no later than the first meeting in August.
Okay,
Why don't we do it the second meeting here in July?
Sure.
Let's do that.
all right, but
We'll get
that's
something
separate
ready.
from what
Yep.
this is
It
about.
is separate,
Separate.
yeah.
So you'll put together a model
Model ordinance for you.
ordinance for that?
Are there any other cannabis something or others
I
that
have
we
no
have
idea.
to think about down the road?
Wouldn't
Oh, sure you
surprise me.
I'm sorry, not cannabis, cannabinoid, but
Cannabinol.
cannabinol.
Yeah.
People can't understand it.
So that would be for the 7/17 discussion.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we'll get something ready for that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, does the board have any other questions of Patrick or Chad?
God, please say no.
All right, then I need a motion to open up the public hearing.
I'll move to open up the
Or
public hearing,
Public comment, I'm
or
sorry.
the public comment portion of the hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Is there anyone here that would like to speak to this hot topic item? Hearing none,
Beth, you sure?
I need a motion to close the public portion.
I'll move to close the public portion of the hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, what's the board's pleasure?
Well, my position is, since it is so clear as mud, that a moratorium is probably the best move at this point in time. So that's what I'd consider adopting ordinance number 96, moratorium. Is that what we're,
Don't you need to read that whole thing?
have to read it? Based on the town attorney review and recommendation, approve ordinance number 96, prohibiting acceptance or consideration of applications for new cannabis and cannabinoid sales, testing, manufacturing, and distribution, and providing for the violation thereof in the town of White Bear, Ramsey County, Minnesota.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Is that?
Aye.
That's fine. Just so you know that really, no sales could take place anyway until the state gets its own operation up and running, and they have till January 1 to do it as well.
2025?
2025, yeah.
Okay. Didn't know that.
And you can't do anything, yeah, no one could even apply for a license before they're ready to go.
Oh. Sure.
All right, moving on.
Did we vote? Did we all in favor?
I thought we did, yeah. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I would have swore we did.
I'm not sure.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, moving on. Item 8A, this is the town planner. Let's see, we got Anthony Ferlita and Deborah Note on 1747 County Road H2 East. Evan, you gonna take this?
Certainly. Good evening, Board. We have two variances before you tonight for this property. The applicants are looking to remove the existing garage and replace the existing house that's on the property. They're utilizing the existing foundation for the new home. As you can tell with the proposed site plan, the new project would encompass the existing footprint of the house and have a little bit of an addition on the north side of the property, and then the new garage would be attached on the west side. The existing foundation of the existing house is located within both the east side and the front setback. Obviously, since they're using that existing foundation for the new house, they would be required to get a variance for both that east side setback as well as that front setback. I would note that the existing garage that's detached is within the west side setback. The new attached garage would actually meet the setback requirements, so that would be one item that they're alleviating or fixing or bringing into compliance with this project. This property does not meet the minimum width requirements of 80 feet. In your zoning ordinance, you're allowed to reduce that minimum side setback as a result. The allowed reduced side setback would be 9.34 feet. Again, though, that foundation is still not meeting that setback. It's at 7.2 feet, so a small variance at 2.14 feet is required for that east side setback. The front setback is proposed at 26.2 feet from the proposed stoop on the front of the house. The rest of the house is 30.2 feet from the front property line, so that comes out to a variance of 8.8 feet. These proposed improvements are shown on the site plan and survey in your materials. They did note earlier in the review with both the variance board and the planning commission, their site plan did show an impervious surface coverage of 25.2%. That was over the allowed threshold of 25% since this is in the shoreland overlay zone. The applicants did agree to reduce the impervious surface though, so that would negate that variance from applying. Again, the variance board reviewed this back in June. They did recommend approval of the variances for the two side setbacks. They did not, again, recommend approval of that impervious surface requirement. And, the applicants agreed to address that again, so that would be not applicable, but it does show that 0.2 over on the site plan. This was reviewed as well by the planning commission meeting at their meeting. They recommended approval. They have their findings in the staff report before you tonight. The conditions they recommended were: one, that the proposed house and attached garage are permitted a setback of 7.2 feet from the east side property line, as shown on the plan submitted. Two, the proposed house shall have a setback of 26.2 feet from the front property line, as shown on the plan submitted. Three, the applicant shall adhere to the 25% impervious surface coverage requirement and shall submit plans showing the requirement is met prior to issuance of a building permit. Four, the structure shall comply with any other requirements of the town. Five, the applicant would have to get any other necessary permits and approvals. And then six, the applicant would have to pay any fees or escrows associated with the project.
All right, Scott, questions, comments?
I have two questions for you, Evan. One is the comment that was made during the variance board meeting is that if the foundation cannot support the proposed construction, then the variances are void and it must meet all setbacks. Has it been confirmed that the foundation, has it been confirmed with you that the foundation can be used or it needs to be replaced?
Mike and I talked to their contractor. Mike and the contractor discussed the issues to meet building code, and to Mike, it was appeared that it was able to be used. So
Okay, so we're good.
correct.
Okay. The second one is, maybe this is more semantics, and I know that one of the many things I've learned from Chad is to be consistent. And I'm looking at what the topic is. We're requesting a variance to encroach into the side yard setback and to encroach into the front yard setback. Now, your recommendations that you just read through is talking more about the variances rather than encroachments to the variance, to the setbacks. And I know if you do the math, it all makes sense. And maybe I'm saying it's 6 of one and half dozen of the other. But if I'm reading this correctly, it's a request for a variance to encroach into the side yard setback and encroach into the front yard setback. Whereas the recommendation is just saying, let's have a setback of so much from the side and the front. Am I making sense to you?
Yes. I mean, the easiest way to explain it would be it's kind of semantics. It's just saying
Yes.
the same thing two different ways. So
But since I'm easily confused, I had to
Right.
read this several times and do the math to make sure that I understood what it was talking about. Is that a big deal or is it not?
The important point is that they intend to use, it's the original foundation, which at the time it was built was conforming. And since they're going to use the original foundation again, they're not actually increasing the encroachment. So the encroachment is static. So I see your point, and but the key point is the encroachment is not increasing. It's staying the same as it presently exists.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, I have no problem with it. If they were increasing it, I'd have a problem.
I think one way, Scott, to think of it is if you say a variance of X number of feet, you'd have to go back and then do the math of, well, what's the minimum? What are they proposing? Whereas if you just simply state, what they're proposing as a setback, it's kind of easier to, understand that quickly. I know some communities kind of take that as the easier way to digest it. So I've kind of tended to use that as the way to type it.
For future requests that may come up next month, next year from other residents, will we use that encroachment wording?
If you want that to continue, yes. Now, if you don't want me to word it that way, I can certainly word it a different way for you.
I think, consider encroaching from this standpoint, are you increasing the extent of the nonconformity? If you're not, you're fine.
Yeah.
But if you're increasing it, therefore encroaching more on the existing setbacks, then you have a problem. So that's the way to think about it.
That would be easy for me, if it was highlighted that there is an increase in the variance, then that's what we need to really focus on. If it's keeping the existing one because it was grandfathered in, or maybe, I know there's been some cases where it actually improved what was previously there, even though it was still a variance. So I guess, again, semantics, I didn't want to derail this, sorry. I just want to make sure I have it straight in my mind. And
Unfortunately, in this area, semantics is important.
those were my questions.
No questions.
Well, usually granting variances is changed from hardship to reasonable use of the property. And normally, when we have variances come before us, you always want to see something decrease, not increase. So less of a nonconformity. But as here, when you're using the same foundation, that there's really going to be no literal change in that setback. So, I mean, now if they had to tear this foundation out, yes, then they're going to have to start moving, readjusting the house and where it sits. But with this one, as much as we see a lot of variances, this one is probably straightforward versus having to make it cumbersome or try to justify why we're allowing it. So I don't have any other questions or problems. Is the applicant here? No? All right, you got anything else, Evan?
No, I would just recommend the findings. If you do adopt, you can reference the findings in the staff report, which is what the planning commission recommended. So
It's definitely, you want to do that. You want to adopt the findings set forth in the staff report.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve the variances as noted and outlined with the plan, the staff report as to the recommendations.
Do I have a second?
And to include the findings for the recommendations.
Yes.
Do you want to include the conditions as well?
Yes.
Recommended?
Yes.
I'll second that.
All right, motion's made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That passes. All right, moving on, 8B, this is the Pine Ridge Hillside, White Bear Parkway. Evan, you gonna take this?
Yeah. Get my notes here. Another variance request before you tonight, board. This one's a little unique in that you have some variances from your zoning ordinance, which is ordinance 35. And then you have variances from the town building code, which is ordinance 8. The variances from the zoning ordinance are in terms of the impervious surface coverage and the maximum building height. You'll notice on the site plan that this lot is close to Rice Lake. It actually does abut Rice Lake, so that makes it a riparian lot. As a result of it being a riparian lot, it is limited in the max building height to 25 feet. What they're proposing for a building would be exceeding that slightly, so that is the first variance request before you tonight. The second one, again, remembering our earlier variance with the impervious surface coverage, that threshold is 25% when we're within that overlay. They'd be at 31.6% impervious surface coverage. So those are the two variances before you tonight from the zoning ordinance. The variances from the building code deal with pole barn, post frame construction. There's a number of requirements that have to be met in order to have a post frame construction structure approved by the town. 3 items are not met, and those are being requested for variances tonight as well. This lot is located just north of the city hall here, and it's zoned industrial, so that allows industrial uses. What they're proposing is what they refer to as a flex storage building, which under our zoning ordinance would fit within the warehouse definition, which again, being industrial, would be a permitted use. They do have a site plan before you tonight showing the different buildings in the parking lot. Since it is a warehouse use, they are required a number of parking stalls. 69 stalls would be required under our zoning ordinance. What they have shown is 70, so they'd obviously be meeting that requirement. The town boards, or the town's building code, again, notes some requirements for post-frame construction. What is interesting is that it does note that the town board can set exterior design standards or requirements for post-frame construction. So that is something you may want to discuss tonight. The variance board reviewed this a couple times the last few months. They ultimately recommended approval of the request, noting how the proposed development does fit with neighboring properties. You'll notice that a lot of the properties are within that shoreland overlay, but since they aren't riparian, they are allowed that higher building height. They discussed how the impact of that structure being over 25 feet may not negatively impact any views or any use of nearby property. The applicant did submit a landscaping plan that the town can review tonight. The Planning Commission reviewed at their meeting last month. The Planning Commission meeting, they reviewed it. They also had the same thoughts as the variance board. They ultimately recommended approval. They did note that the building would have to meet state building code requirements, and therefore that it could be recommended for approval for the building code variances. Again, they concurred with the variance board for the variances from the zoning ordinance. They also did discuss when reviewing these variances, the impervious surface fault would be high in comparison with some of their neighboring properties throughout this area would actually be much closer to compliance than some of their next door neighbors. So that did weigh a little bit into their review. They did recommend a number of conditions for approval. One, that the impervious surface coverage shall not exceed the 31.6% as shown on the submitted plans. 2, a landscaping plan meeting the township's policy would have to be submitted to the township for review and approval prior to building permits. 3, the applicant would have to acquire all other necessary permits. 4, the applicant would have to pay any fees and escrows. And then they also, again, recommended approval of those variances from the building code of the township. Given A, the proposed development would have to meet state and national building code requirements, and that the proposed construction design would add structural stability, was their findings for that. That's it.
That-
I have 2 questions. Have we ever heard back as to the results of their soil borings or the soil conditions? Because I know the applicant noted that due to the soils, they may eventually have to use conventional framing in lieu of post frame. Have we ever heard back how they?
I would defer to the applicant to answer that.
Okay. Second one was, if I understood all this, the variance, and I'm going to reword what you've said. The variance for the impervious surface coverage would be pretty much what everybody else is doing. It's less, but everyone else is doing it. But the variance for the building height would be totally different from everybody else. And I say everybody else, like the neighboring properties. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct. The issue is, since their lot actually abuts the lake, they have a lower maximum building height. Everyone else does not abut the lake, so they're permitted a much taller threshold.
All right, see, that's why I asked the question.
Now, that's where it's kind of an interesting
Okay.
issue here is, since they actually abut the lake, they're kind of negated what they're allowed to build for height.
Is there any other riparian property?
There is a couple on the north side, but those would be in the city of White Bear Lake. So
So then
all
really,
the lots within the township are either non-riparian, or if they are riparian, they're a single family on the west side of the lake.
all right. Well, thank you for explaining that then. Those were my questions.
All right, Steve?
I had the same question that Scott did, as basically both of them. I do want to hear from the applicant first about the building technique he plans to use.
All right, so we have 3 variances: the height,
Right.
the green space, and what was the other one?
The building
Oh,
ordinance,
sorry. Okay.
ordinance 8.
All right, the applicant's here? Yes. You want to come up, just give your name and address for the record?
Yes. Jim French, address N7429, 1195th Street, River Falls, Wisconsin, 54022.
I think one of Scott's questions was, have you guys done boring samples yet?
We did. We potholed out there. As I think you were reading an email, the potential exists that we may have to go to a more conventional foundation system. We did speak with the city inspector about this as well, about some options. The soil conditions at this site that we found were pretty heavy clay, and so in some instances were moist clay, which may be conducive to a concrete foundation. In speaking with, and I don't want to, I think Evan was at the discussion, and speaking with the building official when we talked about the post frame construction methodology, there was almost, I believe, a desire to have the posts in the ground from a structural integrity standpoint, as opposed to maybe a grade beam scenario that would be an option from a more conventional foundation system.
Is the size of the building conducive to grade beam? I know there's a certain square footage where grade beam doesn't even work, then you got to go to full foundation.
Right. It is a possibility. We're not that far along in engineering at this point. We would prefer, which is why the variance is presented, to go with the traditional post frame construction. Until we get a little further into design, we just won't know. There are opportunities as well to over excavate and bring in a bunch of sand material that would then allow that post frame construction to to work, to be engineered.
Scott, any questions?
So just so you know, this is not my strength. So I'm going to ask some questions that you may think that's pretty basic. But if I'm hearing you correctly, you're still kind of trying to figure out the soil conditions. And if you, on the one hand, it sounds like you might have to do this whatever was just discussed, which you'd rather not do. You'd rather do a post, but you'll have to bring in sand to do the post.
Potentially, yep.
So
That's
either
accurate.
way, it's going to be like not really what was high on your wish list to do.
Yeah, I mean, you put a shovel in the ground, you hope it's clean sand, right? That's the goal. Clay adds a little challenge, but yeah, it's just again, once you get the data into the engineer's hands, and then they can work calculations and come up with the best foundation design.
Are you thinking this is like something you'll know in a week, a month, 6 months?
It's probably a little ways out. Yeah. So if I had to guess, several months, 6 months, something like that.
So you wouldn't actually even begin working, putting shovels in the ground until next year.
Yeah, late fall, early spring. Yep.
Next year.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Late fall this year, early spring next year, potentially. And that's if everything falls into place.
That was it.
Steve?
I'm,
I'm probably, you probably heard, I'm the stickler for the post. It's been town policy for as long as I can remember, mid-90s, when I was sitting on the planning commission. It was, like I said, when they say you can build to state specs. The problem is, if we don't normally allow them, to me, it doesn't matter. I'm more concerned that all of a sudden now, if we're going to allow a pole building on a piece of property that the township owns, it seems very hypocritical of us that we've denied private residents that same construction, and all of a sudden when we're selling the property, oh, no problem, you can do that. So that's why I'm really saying real heartburn over this.
Sure.
The green space, I get it, that you're trying to maximize, plus you've got a lot of open space there that you can account for that makes it look not as full. And the building height, we've been through this before on commercial buildings. We've fudged some a lot. So I don't have a problem with the green space, and I don't have a problem with the height. But that pole barn construction, I'm really struggling allowing you to do that on township property when we've denied that so many times on public property or on private property. Mm-hmm. So to me, now I'm only one of three, but to me, I think it would be to your advantage to just go ahead and full speed ahead on grade beam and get her done.
Sure. I would, and maybe Evan could jump in on this one. I know he was involved in a lot of the discussions. I know, I believe it's Mike, the building inspector, did mention, wood foundations are allowed within he thought maybe the heartburn with the post frame was more along the lines of the wood in the soil, which is understandable. I don't know if this was going to travel any further, but the discussion is that I think there was some discussion about looking into amending the requirements because he thought it was a fine construction type.
Well, Mike is of the thought that, obviously we shouldn't really supersede the building code. And since this is housed in our building ordinance, why would we not allow something that's legally allowed by the state building code, is his
The problem
thought.
with that line of thinking is you could build a 60-foot building too, but it's not allowed.
Right, but that'd be under your zoning
Building codes
ordinance.
allow for 60, 70 feet.
Right,
We don't
but
allow.
that's your zoning ordinance. I think the issue is these requirements are housed in your building ordinance, and they really should be in your zoning ordinance. It's kind of housed in the wrong spot. Your zoning kind of dictates your height, your exterior, your building materials. The building code's really, how you're supposed to build stuff. And so I think Mike's concern is, why are we, not allowing something in our building ordinance that's adopted and allowed by a state
And this gets
statute?
back to policy that we were just talking about Heritage Hall. Policy. It's not written down, but it's been policy forever and ever. I just think it's very hypocritical that we're even talking about it because it's township property. That was my concern.
Like conventional pole barns, when you think of conventional pole barns, what do you think of? You think of horse barns, open-sided, this. So can't we really address some of this with the exterior siding? No one will even know that that's pole construction if you jazz up the exterior to make it look like any other normal building.
And that was part of the discussion as well, is, you're not allowing, a Morton building to go up and having, livestock. This is, something that's a little bit different. So in theory, you could request or add conditions that would alleviate any exterior design concerns.
Mr. Chair, we do have an additional member of the Planning Commission in attendance if you'd like to get extra input.
Was there any other questions of Jim?
You had mentioned, I think you didn't mention, it was somewhere in here that you did mention it, sorry, that the concern of putting wood in the ground, especially near a lake, could cause it to rot. But then there was something in here about a wrap.
Yes, there are options. Yes, there you could wrap the foundations. They're to a point now where they're treated well enough to have testing done to withstand 30, 40 years. There are supplemental means to further protect that if that was something like they're kind of plastic sleeve post protectors that could add some longevity, or there are options that do exist out there.
That would protect the wood from the
Correct.
moisture in the soil. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So that was my question.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Beth, are you here to address this or not?
I wasn't, but I can actually speak to it.
You want to come up? Just name and address for the record.
Beth Artner, 5414 East Bald Eagle Boulevard. I had your concerns. My background's commercial construction, and I had the exact same concerns you're having with regard to the footings, because that's what we're talking about, right? And when you talk about the pole barns, normally you think of them in an area, not in the township. We're an urban township now. Mm-hmm. Normally you think of it like where they've got horse barns, like you said, places that are a lot less dense, like Grant or, Hugo. Well, Hugo not so much anymore, but that's where I would think of them. I don't know, maybe in the zoning, would we just outlaw that completely? I don't know. I struggled with it too. I had the same issues you had with it. So, and I abstained on my vote, so I wasn't
What was the
helpful.
vote on this one again from Planning Commission?
Well, you'd one abstention.
I was the one abstention.
Unanimous
The
acceptance.
rest of them, yeah,
Unanimous
vote.
acceptance?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Thanks, Beth.
sorry.
Another question for Evan. I think I heard you trying to differentiate between the building ordinances and the zoning ordinances. And is this another opportunity as we continue to go through everything to
This would
clean
be.
stuff up? So this is, even though this topic is now bubbled up, this was something that really should be addressed as part of
Yeah.
the general review.
This is kind of an aside from our variances tonight, but yeah, there are things in your building ordinance that really should be in your zoning ordinance. Because the issue is when you're going through and getting variances from this, it's a totally different process than the zoning ordinance. The building ordinance just states, if you have hardship and you can meet the intent of the ordinance, you can grant it. There's no criteria or anything to base it off of. So it's, you can kind of see in the staff report, there's kind of like two different things going on there. So it's kind of a not ideal way to go through it. So.
Well, we just had a fairly large building a couple, 3 years ago, put on right on H2. And he came in with a pole barn and we made him put a slab on grade. We've had applicants at the airport wanting to put up more hangars, pole barns. We said no. So we keep saying no, no, no. No, township's policy is we just don't allow pole barn construction.
Which you can do, but
And so all I'm saying is, I'll say it again, I feel really hypocritical about all of a sudden changing our minds because we're selling township property. So I've said my piece.
And one thing you need to keep in mind is the fact that building code and zoning code are two separate issues. And you cannot mix the two. In fact, you should not mix the two, because if the building code allows it, you cannot stop it. The Supreme Court is very clear on that point. The building code, as adopted by the state of Minnesota, preempts any local building codes. In fact, you have by your own ordinances adopted the Uniform Building Code, of the state of Minnesota. So do not use building code to,
If this had been moved, if there was within the zoning ordinance that no pole barns would be allowed, would that then get around this whole discussion around building?
I'd have a problem with that because now you're encroaching on, to use a word we've been using before, you're encroaching on the building ordinance, the building code.
Okay, all right. Just thought I'd ask.
Though, on the other hand, you do have the right under zoning to deal with aesthetics.
Okay.
And I would assume, and I guess you could state that a pole barn is an aesthetic issue. And you would therefore be allowed under that basis to forbid it,
Under zoning.
under zoning,
But
as aesthetics.
but now you're getting me a little confused. So you're basically saying, at least I thought this is what you said, because it's allowed by the state building code, that is the superseding piece, whether it's pole construction or not.
Let me clarify.
Okay, please.
If you're going to vote against this because it violates the town building code, you've got a problem. If it's permitted under the state building code, because the state building code does preempt the local building code. And actually, in our situation, we don't have a local building code because we've adopted the state building code. But the point being, so if you're dealing solely with issues, if you're turning it down or approving it based solely on the building code, you got a problem. On the other hand, if you're dealing with the zoning code and aesthetics, then you're in a whole different issue, and the building code does not. The building code cannot preempt an aesthetic standard set by the township under the zoning code. So you've got to keep, it's a fine line, but aesthetics is a zoning issue. And under that basis, you could control the use of pole barns. But if you're going to use the building code, then you have to be very careful because the building code, state building code allows pole barns, you pretty much stuck.
So let me ask you this. I hate to get this more complicated, but I'm going to.
Well, it is.
So when you say falling under the zoning ordinance, you can restrict by aesthetics.
Exactly.
So can you deny based upon aesthetics, or can you require a certain level of aesthetics be made in order to build the way they want it?
If you have aesthetic standards in your zoning code, you could use that,
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna go back
And
to
we do
about-
under our zoning code, aesthetics comes into play.
Yeah.
a couple, 3 years ago, I don't remember if it was an applicant that came in or if we were looking at allowing these mother and father, neighbor, or not neighbor, but cousin, relative, little houses parked in people's driveways. They meet building codes. They're all, Mike even said that they have to meet building codes. We didn't allow them. They meet state building codes, but we didn't allow them.
Okay,
What's the
well,
difference?
there's a difference there. You're talking about mother-in-law apartments?
No, I'm talking about actual little buildings that were put up either in a driveway or they were
backyard.
they were extra buildings.
Zoning code does allow you to deal with the size of a structure. You already do that right now in your zoning code. So, sure, you can build them to meet building code, but if they don't meet the area you set forth in your zoning code, it doesn't make any difference.
So the same as setbacks, you could, in theory, build a foot away from another building and meet building code.
Exactly.
But your zoning ordinance would supersede that because you set the locational difference in that.
No, town policy versus ordinances is a little
How can,
Well,
foggy
ordinances
here.
aren't designed to set sound town policy, so, yeah.
how can we address the concern that Ed brought, which is we've had precedents for so long and then we're changing our mind in appearances?
It sounds like to me.
can be viewed as as reality, and we're changing our mind.
Well,
Are we really comparing apples to apples, the ones that we've
that
denied in the
is,
past?
that's exactly what that'd be that's my point is, are we comparing apples to apples? I wouldn't,
Question that.
I can't say that.
I know some of the arguments, now not the one on Hammond Road, but others we looked at for pole frame construction, where they didn't meet the requirements of the zoning for size. There were of agricultural, there was somewhere in our ordinance that talks about the size of the land to do that in, to have, they were building it for a horse barn, but they didn't have enough room for it. And said, no, you can't do that, if I remember. But that one on Hammond Road, yeah, you're right, we said no.
I'm just trying to be consistent, that's all.
I
Every
understand
request
you are, and that's
also
good.
is, supposed to be reviewed independent of other requests too. So just because, case X got approved in this year doesn't mean that, the next request has to be approved or has to be denied either, so.
That's correct. Each case is dealt with separately. In fact,
As long as your findings are legal and,
right.
yeah.
What you've done in the past has not handcuffed you to what you can do in the future. The court's clear on that. The
Well, I'm
only
just afraid it
time,
might come back to bite us.
well, no, it won't. It won't. The only time you
From
have
a legal standpoint.
from a legal standpoint, the only time you have a problem is when you have two projects of basically the same nature, in fact, they almost have to be identical, and you look at them on the same night, and you approve one and deny the other, then you do have a problem. But the court has been clear that time itself is not, is a consideration. Now I'm not explaining that correctly. Just because you've approved one type of project in the past does not mean you have to approve it again in the you have to approve that again in the future. The court's clear that the difference in time of the applications because of the difference in time, because of the time difference, each project is independent of each other. It's only when they come in basically on the same night, at the same time, that time is not a relevant issue.
Okay, to still go back to what I heard Ed say, it's appearances. We've denied in the past, okay, we don't have to abide by that. I mean, it's a good idea, but we don't have to abide by it. But here we have our property that we sold, and we're making this allowance.
Well, I know what you're saying, but don't get caught in the trap of always trying to be consistent in terms of appearance. Sometimes, because on a surface it may appear the same, but it's not quite that easy.
Could I make a suggestion? Since there is varying degrees of heartburn on making this decision.
Well, it's the board's priority or prerogative to vote on this.
Absolutely.
And I'm only one vote, so.
But I just want to put this out there for your consideration. Seeing that the applicant, based upon soil samples, is
Still up in the air.
still up in the air, and that they're deciding what the best construction for this would be based upon making a final decision on that. And the fact that the sale of this property is contingent upon them getting approval of their construction. Should we table this until they get a better idea which direction they're going to go? Because if they go in a direction that's not going to cause you any heartburn at all, Ed, I don't see the point of us. I don't see the point of us debating it at this point.
It's a good point, but you also said the sale of this property is dependent on what we allow them to do, and this just gets back to my point. So I want to be very careful what we do here.
Understood.
But that may be a good avenue to run, because you guys are still really not sure what's going to happen with the soil. I would have thought that should have been resolved way a long time ago, but that's your guys' business. But obviously, if you got a time schedule till late fall, it's not like you're going to be pulling a permit tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you're right. And it's kind of a chicken or egg kind of scenario, right? Where we go full blown into engineering and design and go down this process if in a direction if we're not going to be allowed to go in that direction. So it would be truly what the variance is asking for is the latitude to have that be an option should there be, so we could then evaluate and not get so far down in 6 months or whatever and come back and it's wouldn't be allowed. And then sorry to shift gears here, but from an aesthetic standpoint too, and I understand you picture post frame. I cringe at the pole barn term, right? It's just, we've all seen them. Just for clarity's sake, the structure is the post frame. So it's buried, it's covered, it's insulated, it's weather tight, it's per building code. We did propose the aesthetics in a cement board and stone and heightened aesthetics on these. So it's not a kind of tin shed, like it's probably everybody jumps into their mind when they hear those terms. So more commercial grade, heightened aesthetics. So sorry, I just wanted to add that, and then back to again, this is all your guys' call, right? But from a tabling standpoint, it wouldn't really allow the clarity, so to speak. Now what it would allow is if we did go down the engineering path, we might be able to check a box that says we couldn't do it. We couldn't do the post frame. That might be a hurdle to clear. But again, if they find they are, or we are able to do it, we would prefer to do that. And then now we have to kind of get deep into engineering costs and kind of go the distance on the building design. So,
But you said you've already done the boring samples?
we did pothole. Yep, potholing, had Braun Intertech out there.
Okay, so what more do you need to do to clarify?
We would have to take another step there and go get like drill rigs brought in to do blows, you get pounds per square foot for soil bearing capacity, take that information, go to an engineer and have them do the structural design of the building. So it's fairly involved.
So I guess what we're looking for the applicant is some flexibility, and I say they get further down the road with doing some sampling and it's engineered and it's found that the pole barn construction isn't going to work and we got to go another way. Are they going to have to go through the whole variance and planning commission again, or is the language in there enough to not require having to go through that and they just come back here and based upon soil sample X, we're going to go with this direction of construction?
Only if they needed a different type of variance.
Okay.
If they find that the construction method doesn't require a variance, then, all a variance is the right to do something a certain way. Doesn't mean you have to do it that way, it just gives you the right to do it. So no, to answer your question, Pat.
Okay.
If they don't, if their construction method doesn't require the variance, then you don't need it.
All right. Well,
So you could just approve the variances from your zoning ordinance tonight, and then I guess if you want to table the variance from ordinance 8, the building code, you could do that as an
I don't
option
want to
as
speak
well.
for the other two board supervisors. So if we want to put it to a vote, we'll just put everything to a vote. I don't want, I've said my piece. If I can sway or not, it doesn't matter to me. There's 3 votes here. If you want to it's board prerogative. What do you guys want to do?
Well, first off, are we going to divide this up to approve pieces?
Actually, I think you should.
Let's
One
take the
set
easy
of
pieces first.
Yeah, you should divide it up because you got the building ordinance code, you got building ordinances, and you got zoning ordinances. They should be divided up. Can I make one comment that'll probably confuse things even more? Okay, appearance.
That's why we have you here, Chad.
I'm good at it too.
Confusing?
That's confusing. Appearance should not be a straitjacket. You have to look at the logic and the basic facts behind why you're granting the variance. It doesn't make any difference if we're selling the property or if a private third party is selling the property. The question is, does the variance make sense? I understand your concern about appearance, and we should be consistent in a lot of ways, but consistency should be is it logical to grant this variance? No matter who the owner is.
All right, board, any other questions?
No.
What's the pleasure of the board? What do you want to do?
Which one are we going to vote on? What are we voting on?
Can, Mr. Attorney, can they just vote to table it?
Well, you have the 60-day rule problem. Even with the building code, you have a 60-day problem. So
So the 60-day, let me double check here.
was that
We issued
waived?
an extension once.
Yeah.
That extension would end on 8/5, so you got a month to
Yeah.
go.
So you could table it if you wanted to. Table all of it or part of it.
You could, yeah.
But you still, both the building and the zoning are subject to the 60-day rule. So you'll have to act on them.
That wasn't confusing, Chad, thanks.
Yeah, try.
So is this just going to mean you go through heartburn again in a month?
I
2
propose you
weeks.
run them all three separate and take votes on them and let the chips go where they fall.
So,
At least the applicant will know where
Have
we're
some
headed.
closure, yeah.
which you want to do first? Just pick which one you want to vote on.
Well, they've got them in the list here. Starting at the ordinance number 8, the building code.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move to approve the variance for section 5-34.1 BDH of ordinance 8 to allow construction of a post frame building. Is that, we want to leave
That's the
anyone?
first one.
That's the first one.
And the basis for adopting that variance would be the
Oh, the
findings set forth in the staff report.
Yes, as set forth in the staff report. And I guess also because it meets our state building code requirements.
I'll second that.
All right, motion's made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
I will vote nay. All right, then the next one is the maximum building height, or no, coverage, green space.
I'll move to approve, is that 30%? What are we, which one are we, what are we?
25%.
Oh, 25%? I'll move to approve the maximum impervious surface coverage for a parcel of 25% in the shoreline overlay by
By
6%.
Okay. I'll second that.
All right, motion made and seconded. All in favor?
And again, the reason for adopting that variance is supported by the findings.
In the staff report.
Do you want to include the conditions that we recommend?
Oh, yes.
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 Yes, that, absolutely. And the conditions as noted in the staff report.
Anything else?
No.
I'll second that.
All right, motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. And I'll move to the maximum height, building height of 25 feet for the building on the riparian lot by 5.67%. With findings, with the support for the staff report and findings and conditions. How's that?
Okay, second.
All right, motion's made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, there you go.
Wow, that's exhausting.
Kidding.
Are you clear on your instructions?
I think so.
All right, moving on. 8C, we deleted.
Yes,
Next
that'll be on the
meeting,
July
17th.
17th agenda, yes.
All right, so we're moving on
I
to
want
8.
to tell the public why we're deleting it.
The developer requested it be tabled based upon their inability to be in attendance this evening.
All right, so we're going to move on to 8D. This is the Met Council Work Group.
Yes, Mr. Chair, you should have received in your supplement here the memo that came from the Met Council with regards to this work group that they'd like to put together. We do have a township resident who is interested in serving on behalf of the township, and he is in attendance this evening. And we need to have something in place or somebody in place to recommend to the Met Council for this work group by July 21st. I suppose the applicant could speak to this.
Excuse me, first, this attachment though, is not applicable to the topic we're discussing regarding the
It's not.
legislative task force for the Metropolitan Council?
Okay, you have to come up to the microphone because we got to have you on the record here. Just state your name and address, please.
I thought it was.
No.
My name's Tim David, 5294 Baldwin Boulevard East. And I just want to clarify, I saw this as I came in, but this item from Charlie Zelli is related to a task force regarding water, surface water and groundwater sustainability.
Okay.
We were talking about, and you sent me a text or an email regarding talking about an item tonight regarding the legislative task force for reform and redesign
Of the Met Council.
of the Met Council.
Yes. That's what we're talking about. You're right. I apologize, folks. We're getting asked for many work groups. So this, Mr. David is correct. That is the one that we're discussing this evening.
His or this one?
His.
His.
Yep. I'm
We
sorry.
can disregard.
Yeah, you can chuck this.
So for the minutes to reflect that the supplement that we were going to discuss has been pulled.
Yep. Well, no, we'll discuss the topic here this
Later?
evening, but the supplemental information, please remove that from your packet.
Okay.
So in that regard, I would suggest that the applicant give us, or the person who is interested here, give us some background on what it is that we're talking
Before
about.
you do that, would this? Nope, it wouldn't. I was looking at your weekly wrap. I thought maybe that was the email that was referenced, but no, never mind. Strike that.
What, you want to give us an overlay here first?
Yeah,
Start
what are we
over?
talking about?
Yes.
All right, I can offer some
Now,
background.
let's hear from Patrick first here.
So we, or the legislature has requested to put together a work group to go through reforming the overall makeup, structure, mission statement, whatever it is you want to call, with the Met Council, and they are looking for representatives from various groups around the metropolitan area. And one of those that they are looking for is a township representative in order to speak to this project on our behalf.
So is this every community in the Met Council circumference?
I think so.
No, I can offer some.
All right.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you. And the first thing I'll do is I can hand out the language from the legislation that was signed by the governor regarding the Metropolitan Governance Task Force.
Okay.
I have 3 copies for the supervisor. I just have a couple things highlighted that might help the discussion tonight. I think for everybody. but-
Thank you.
So as Pat mentioned, this legislation was passed this past year to create a task force to develop recommendations to redesign the governance and reform the Met Council. So I highlighted on page 1 of that law, the Metropolitan Governance Task Force is established to study and make recommendations to the legislature on reform and governance of the Metropolitan Council. The task force will be made up of 17 individuals, 8 legislators will serve on this, 4 from the House, 4 from the Senate, and 9 individuals will be appointed at large under that membership list that identifies which groups will be allowed to appoint individuals. And those groups are representative of the entire state of Minnesota. It's not just the metropolitan area. But you can see I highlighted number 5 is one person representing townships in the metropolitan area appointed by the Minnesota Association of Townships. Okay, so there will also be individuals appointed by the Association of Metropolitan Municipalities, the Association of Minnesota Counties, the AFL-CIO, one person by the governor, one person by Move Minnesota, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm here to talk to you tonight about is the possibility of myself being appointed to this task force representing townships.
But this is pretty, we got to stop here. This is pretty clear that it says you have to be appointed by Matt, Minnesota
That's
State
correct.
Township.
That's correct. And that's what I want to partly talk about. Right. So what I understand is that the White Bear Township is no longer a member of MAT.
That's correct.
And I've talked to 2 of the board members and Patrick, and there's some possibility that we could reignite those discussions. But the situation is that it's recognized that the MAT has full discretion over who they appoint. There's no requirement that the person they appoint is from a member township of their organization, or even that that person lives in a township. So they have broad discretion as to who they appoint. Matt has called me directly, and we've had a lot of conversations. And of course, they certainly would like to get the White Bear Township to rejoin, and I think that would facilitate them appointing me. What's significant here, in addition, is that it should be noted that both Representative Frank Hornstein, Chair of the House Senate Transportation Committee, and Senator Scott Dibble, Chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, have called Matt directly and requested that I be appointed to the Legislative Task Force. This legislation that was created, I worked with Frank Hornstein and Scott Dibble, and I provided some of the initial language that was used to create this legislation. On the second page, to identify the significance of what this Metropolitan Task Force is about, it's to evaluate options to reform and reconstitute the Metropolitan Council. We're going to consider, or this task force will consider, direct election of members rather than appointed, possibly a combination of directly elected or appointed members, possibility of a council of governments, possibly reapportioning responsibilities of the Metropolitan Council to other state agencies and local units of governments, literally redesigning the $3 billion annual budget of the Metropolitan Council, possibly adopting a home rule charter that will govern the Met Council, and looking at any other regional governance approaches as viable alternatives to the current structure of the Metropolitan Council. So to editorialize, this is huge. This is a significant opportunity to redesign the Metropolitan Council. Everybody knows that they are a $3 billion annual budget. They have limited accountability to the constituents they serve. Their members are appointed, they are not elected. All right. So it's at a situation where Matt really does not have that great a gain if they appoint me without White Bear Township being a part of the MAT. However, White Bear Township loses a significant opportunity if they lose the chance to have one of their residents appointed. And the political clout of Frank Hornstein and Scott Dibble requesting that I be assigned to this task force through Matt is pretty significant, should be recognized. I know there need to be discussions about the White Bear Township rejoining Matt, and I would encourage that those begin. And I've stressed that strongly to Matt. I think it would behoove and be appropriate for the White Bear Township to identify the support that they would like to see from Matt. And I understand there's been a lack of support from Matt in the past. And I would encourage, as I've done in my role for 25 years, take a look at those issues and turn them around and say, this is what we did not receive, this is what we do now need to receive. I know there's history, but that is history. I know the township was very successful this past legislative session. It won't always be that way, probably, and I would deem it to be probably in the best interest to team with MAT in the future. Matt has been given a very valuable chip to play by being able to appoint a person to the task force. The White Bear Township can be a part of that value of that chip by having one of their residents appointed to that task force. And the White Bear Township can have a significant role through that resident about how the Met Council interacts with White Bear Township in the future. I recognize that the township could not, or would not be appropriate for the township to tonight say they would rejoin MAT. But here's what my ask is, that I would request that the town board send a letter of intent to the Association of Townships stating that the township would like to engage in discussions with the association about the support the association can provide to the township and the support needed by the township, with the purpose of rejoining the association upon agreement of the support requested and the support to be provided. And the first indication of support to be provided to the township by the association would be to appoint their White Bear Township resident and Park Board member, Tim David, to the Legislative Metropolitan Governance Task Force. Just as a bit of a background, if I were appointed to the Legislative Task Force, White Bear Township gets a township resident of 50 years on the task force to redesign the Met Council. You'd get a person who's been successfully active in many community initiatives. I've been president of the Bald Eagle Area Association, president of the White Bear High School Hockey Booster Club, president of the Bald Eagle Yacht Club, successfully led the opposition to the Rush/Purple Line for the last 2 years. One of the only efforts that's ever been able to significantly impact the Met Council. I have 25 years of professional experience redesigning the governance and operations of large governmental organizations, including the state of Minnesota, state of Illinois, state of New York, and the federal government of Canada. I am your township board member, and I am a person who has been requested by Scott Dibble and Frank Hornstein to be appointed. And I would offer I'm a true proponent of the value of good government that is effective and efficient and truly represents the constituents it serves. It's my belief that the Met Council is about as far away from the spectrum that it can be of direct democracy that I think we practice here in the township. So I would offer this a significant opportunity to start discussions. And
I think before we go any farther, Patrick, you have to confirm this. Do we have to be a member of Matt to appoint him to this?
Sure sounds like it.
Because we talked today, you
Yep.
said
So
you had,
based upon the information that I gave you guys, I made those phone calls to representatives of the Met Council, and Tim's absolutely right. That was something different. I was told at that point, the memo that I sent out to you guys, no, we don't have to have membership to MAT to be in the one that I sent you. I just, can I have 2.5 minutes, Mr. Chair? Please?
okay.
Okay. Number one, I, based upon your credentials, Tim, and whomever it is that you want to have speak on your behalf, I don't think the board is questioning your ability to perform those tasks that is being spelled out here. Our non-membership with MAT is a completely different discussion to have. And if I could just hit on a few things.
I'm fully aware of that.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely fully aware. And let me clarify.
I've got the floor right now. Okay. It's not so much that we didn't feel we were being represented adequately. We had that discussion directly with members of MAT 18 months ago, I think it was, and stated exactly that about our dissatisfaction about being listened to at all. After that meeting, I was contacted by the director saying that they couldn't really do anything else for us beyond maybe adjusting our insurance premiums. And to me at that point, and this is a staff's opinion away from the board, was truly the most condescending and misguided response to what it was that we had spoken to them about. We don't even get insurance with MAT. And we were told that we were going to have our premiums adjusted. And the other point is, too, it's not that we feel dissatisfied with not having MAT perform well for us. It's the fact that left on our own, we did much better. And our representatives have specifically said to us on multiple occasions now that they are looking to help us get through a discussion for long-term solutions to our very specific needs. And quite frankly, I don't think we have a track record of success by the lobbyists for the MAT or what it is that they're thinking about the township in general. I, as staff, would like to have the opportunity to get through those discussions with our representatives before we even start to field discussions with MAT about rejoining. I'll cut it there. I'm sure we're going to get a response.
Well, hang on a minute. Steve?
Well, I do not share. I mean, I don't disagree with some of the points you made. I disagree with the approach that the Township Association has taken with us through the current board executive plus the prior one. Lip service to anything they could do for us or would do for us. So they have done nothing. I really is the one that brought it up to get away from the association because they provided nothing. I do not believe it is in our best interest to give them what I want from them. I think they should be the ones to take the first approach and say, we want you back. There has been no olive branch of any kind. And as Patrick pointed out, it appears that legislatively, they were manipulating behind the scenes to not get us anything. But as far as you go, Tim, I'm 100% think you'd be the great advocate for the townships that are around the Twin Cities, which there are very few.
Agreed.
And so you bring something, your credentials bring something. The association really represents rural issues. They do not represent urban townships. And I don't know what gripe they would have to not appoint you. But having said that, I'm willing to listen. I don't agree with the long waiting 18 months or whatever you're proposing, but I think they need to come forward.
I'm just going to reiterate what I think Steve and Pat both touched base on. My first question, of course, is how many townships truly are in the metropolitan area that would be covered by the Met Council? And I've understood really pretty much we're it. So if I heard you correctly earlier, you had said that they have the ability to appoint anybody, anywhere, anytime. So whether or not the township is in the MAT should be irrelevant, especially if they have received phone calls from some of the high-ranking legislators. I would think they would want to pay attention to that. It is a little, for me personally, disappointing to hear that they are potentially, appearances can be everything, potentially leveraging this chip to benefit their organization. And I want to reiterate what Steve had just mentioned. I was also massively disappointed to hear, secondhand, I don't know this for first, that there was quite a bit of vehemence on their part, dismayed that the township did receive funding this legislative session. And there was some comments made that, geez, maybe we shouldn't have and let the greater township base participate rather than us. This after we've received $14 a year for the past 5, 6, 10, 20 years. We finally get something, and the word was that they were actively trying to talk that down. So, again, to reiterate, Steve, I'm not putting all the words in your mouth, but yes, you and I have had many conversations over the years on the telephone. It's nice to meet you finally. And I've really valued your input on a lot of perspectives. The rush line is one of those. But as far as having you represent the town, represent townships in general as part of this redesign, I would think would be a slam dunk, and it would behoove the MAT to find somebody of your caliber to speak for them. That's all.
And plus, too, this is a great idea, because we've been under the Met Council's thumb for so long, abiding by all their policies and not getting a nickel for it. And it's very stringent on our budget and on our policies. We have to always look at, how does this fit in with the Met Council, and what are the repercussions? So I'm all for this. This is a great idea. I
Totally agree.
But I think the board is struggling about getting back in with Matt. I got to believe there's a way around this.
Can I offer comments?
Sure.
Great comments. Absolutely appreciate it. And it's absolutely true that Matt is not under any requirement that they appoint somebody from a member of their association. So they do have the discretion to appoint me, even though I'm not part of their, or even though we are not part of their association. I guess, yes, I recognize that Shep Harris, their lobbyist, is trying to leverage this opportunity a little bit to get you folks back in the fold. And I certainly would not encourage that at all until we as a township felt we got our money's worth and got the support from the MAT. So I understand, appreciate that point completely.
But you also have a timeline here for the
There is a
appointment.
timeline issue of July 15th, when,
And I think I don't know, but I can't speak for the board, but I think we would be more than happy to submit a letter of recommendation, our full support behind it,
I was going to say the same thing.
that you could take to Matt and lobby on your behalf to say, hey, look, I've got backing from all these associations. You got anybody else that's even stepping up to the plate?
Yep, I thought that also, and a recommendation would be great and helpful, but Frank Hornstein gave me a call earlier in the week, and he said he felt if we even got a letter of intent from the township to have discussions with MAT, that might be enough to facilitate MAT say, okay, Tim David will be appointed.
Maybe we could have a letter of intent saying we would be willing to listen to what they have to offer us to rejoin.
Now, there's a point of view.
I think a letter could be crafted as such to leave the door open. But again, I met, and Patrick did, with Scott Dibble this legislative session, and he said, well, you have a lobbyist right out of the get-go. We said, no, we don't. We do not have a lobbyist because we were not a member. And we made it very clear with that. But, you know, I've told you, and I agree that you're a great candidate to be on this committee for the reasons you've stated. And I'm open to propose we write a letter in support of that and leave the door open for communication, but at the same time say it's in your court. Because I don't think we should be going to them and saying, ha, 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 you know, we didn't need you, because that's not the way it should work. I have been a member of worked for the Minnesota Association of Townships 30-some years ago in the insurance business. We used to be the insurance carrier for the township. So I know the grassroots, I know what they're about, but yet they're supposed to be responsible to the membership. And when we asked for help, we got nothing, zero.
And I believe we're probably the highest paid association.
Oh, yeah.
We have an audience member that wants to speak to at this point.
Yeah, I
But
know.
Tim, I think, do you want to make a motion? We read a letter.
Let's tell you what, Beth, let's hear from somebody else here, just chomping at the bit.
Can I just make a couple additional comments or clarifications on things? I would offer that the question was raised of how many other townships. There actually are 41 other townships in the 7-county metropolitan area. And I mentioned that to
Oh, wait a minute, how many
41
townships?
townships in the
Well, when you
7-county
take into
metropolitan
account
area.
Washington, Dakota County, and Scott, and also
Anoka.
Anoka.
There's quite a few.
And actually, Chisago is part of the metropolitan. No, oh, yes, I keep forgetting that. Thanks, Evan. But yeah, there are a number of
They're counting the
townships.
county as a township?
No.
There's townships, but
In Washington, Dakota, Anoka, there are, and Scott, there are still townships.
Are they covered, or do they have to adhere to the guidelines issued by the Metropolitan Council?
Yep. If they're in the 7-county metropolitan area, they're subject to Met.
do they pay $1 million a year to the Met Council?
I very much doubt
Don't
it.
think so.
And they're not urban townships.
That's right.
And that's also
technically-
true.
That's also true.
Technically, I think they're urban in the sense they're close enough to the cities.
Well,
Statute.
They aren't classified
actually,
that way, though.
Population-wise,
we've
they
looked,
don't fall.
Evan, I've looked at that. And there's maybe one, possibly
There's like one or
two
two.
other that may qualify.
And we've spoken about those here.
Yeah, it's if you look at the definition of an urban township, we're about the only ones. We're the only ones that definitely qualify as an urban township. There's a couple others that probably do.
But don't have near the impact.
Right.
Anyway.
I've been talking with Tim Anderson, Senior Planner at Metropolitan Council. He is researching the budgets of those other 40-plus townships and the population to get a measure of how big and how significant they are. I would offer that White Bear Township is probably the big dog in the Twin Cities, and you have tremendous clout right now. And I mentioned, I mentioned to Matt that there are 41 townships, and they, Shep Harris, our lobbyist, says, oh, really? I wasn't quite aware that it's that many. So the point is, there's a tremendous powerhouse of townships in the Twin Cities area, and you folks can, you have the attention of Matt, you have the attention of Frank Hornstein and Scott Dibble right now. So I'd encourage you to think about how we can use that clout to help influence how the Met Council might look.
All right, thanks, sir.
Yep.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
If we're looking for leverage, what if we started an association?
You got us name and address.
5414 East Bald Eagle Boulevard. Okay, if we're looking for clout, why don't we form an urban township association in in this metro area? That would make the most sense. You know, the
That would
rural
probably just
interest.
be us.
Exactly.
Well, maybe two others.
Well, okay.
Okay, but I mean, it would make sense because we've got a great representative, and it would be a way around because their interests aren't the same as our interests.
They're pretty specific on appointed by the Minnesota Association of Townships. I think that's where we're having the
Can't be
hurdle.
Minnesota urban townships.
Well, but not recognized under statute. I know what you're driving at.
I like your angle, Beth.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the way the statute is written, yeah, it's got from Matt.
Really,
Yeah.
master people. Thank you.
Well, but I think part of our motion could be that if Patrick sat down and drafted something with, I don't want to say an olive branch, I'm just saying a recommendation of Mr. David for the appointment with his qualifications, with his background, with board's approval, and then saying, then, as Steve said, if we come back to you, what can you do for us?
Throw it to them to make the first move at that point.
Right.
Yep, that's fine.
Again, we would be open to hearing what they have to offer.
I think we have to look at some of the guidance provided by the House Transportation Chair in getting that option out there to rejoin. And I think that will take care of this. It's in support and saying the door is open.
Staff is more than happy to do that.
There's some urgency to get this done, however, so.
And get it done by the end of this week, so 2 days.
All right, you don't need a formal motion on this, do you? This is just a
Just you're directing, you're giving staff directive.
all right, but I think that's the way to approach it, and hopefully still get in the timeline. All right,
Can I get board's consent to have Ed edit this with me so that it's appropriate to send out on behalf of the board? Because I know if I go to more than one, it's serial meeting and we can't do that.
You can't do that.
So it's just got to be me and Ed or whomever else wants to be in on it.
or Steve, you've got more background in the township.
I'd be more than happy to do it.
There you go.
That's fine.
Okay, yeah. Ed and Steve only.
Okay.
Let's move on. We have one more item on the agenda. This is employee retirement.
Yeah, sad to report that Lynette Ollinger is retiring. We have more musical chairs.
Tomorrow, next week, next
3
month?
weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks, she will be leaving. So Tom and I are going to be talking through how we want to proceed. The good news is that we already have a staff member in-house who has been training directly under Lynette for the last almost 3 years, with a couple of tweaks that we'll have to do to get her integrated fully into assuming some of the day-to-day responsibilities that Lynette will be abandoning when she leaves. And I think I'm going to hold off on a recommendation for posting this job until the executive committee meets this month, because I would like to have a further discussion about how this will all fit into our other retirees here in the next 12 to 18 months. So before I make any kind of a recommendation about filling that position directly, either internally or posting for it, I'd like to work through a couple of scenarios here in the next couple of weeks. But I did want to get a retirement notice to you.
Has she formally submitted a resignation letter?
Yes.
Do you have it with you?
I do.
So you need a motion to accept that?
Yeah.
I mean, what if we said no, we don't want to accept it?
Legally, good luck.
And realistically, try stopping her.
Yeah.
I'm sure she'd stay on another 10 years.
Yeah. So she has said, after 14 years in the public sector, I'll be retiring from Whiteburg Township officially as of the October 13th, 2023 payroll. That's when all of her extra time runs out. Please accept this written 3-week notice of my intent to work through July 21st, 2023 to provide additional cross-training and to complete tasks in the finance area as needed. I intend to use all paid time off after that date up to my retirement date. Want to express my thanks to the town board for your dedication to the township mission. Oh, that's nice. And the value that you place in the township staff. Over the 6 years that I've been employed here, I have viewed the town board as a source of stability, professionalism, and common sense government. I think that's what Chad says to us all the time. I've enjoyed working in and for this community and getting to know our residents and neighboring communities. I view myself as a good steward of the resources that I'm entrusted with. I'm proud of the completed projects and accomplishments that I've been involved in during my time at the township, and I value the friendships and relationships that I've been building over these years. Best to all of you.
Well, 3 weeks isn't a lot of time.
It's not, but like I said, our day-to-day requirements will be fulfilled between Tom and Haley.
It was that extra attention to detail that she provided during the audits that I think was
Yeah.
very helpful.
We have exceptional audits the last 3 years.
And in no small part because of,
A large part because of Lynette. Yes.
More musical chairs.
Yep.
sugar.
All right, so I need a motion to,
To accept that?
Yeah.
I'll move to accept Lynette's
resignation letter.
Retirement letter.
retirement letter.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. How can you say aye
How about
any
if I
more
say
nay?
no? I'll say nay. It's not.
I dare you.
Aye. All right, we have one more item on the agenda. It's a closed session with the attorney, but we have folks in the audience. So I'm gonna move open time up because once we go into closed session, everyone has to leave, and I'm not sure how long this is gonna take. So if there's anyone here for open time, the mic's yours.
We didn't cancel.
Thank you.
Did you sign in the attendance back there? All right, thank you.
Thanks. All right,
Intern.
Yeah.
Well, that's a shame.
yeah, I know.
We knew it was coming though, because she wasn't.
One moment, please.
All right, I need a motion to come out of close.
I'll move to come out of closed session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chad, you want to recap?
Yes, so we were discussing the ongoing litigation involving the White Bear Lake level case. We're talking about the administrative law hearings that are scheduled for December.
All right,
Do you know what time we come out of closed? Does it matter? 8:56.
all right, we have no other agenda items. I need a motion to receive agenda material supplements.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Need a motion to adjourn at 8:56.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
Gentlemen, just one more quick question, a comment on Mr. David. The one concern that I think is important to keep in the back of your mind is with both chairs of the House and Senate lobbying for him with the association, and knowing that we got 7